Gambit Chads, you asked for it, you got it, a brand new gambit against the Trompowsky. It goes d4, knight f6, and if bishop to g5 on the second move, we are going to play knight e4, attacking the bishop, bishop comes back to f4, and this crazy brand new gambit, we are going to play e5, immediately sacrificing a center pawn. If they play bishop takes e5, we're going to go knight c6, attack this bishop very much, and eventually attack this king very quickly. Things get very difficult for white very fast. If they play pawn takes, we're going to play d5. If they don't en passant, things are bad. If they do en passant, things are even worse. We're going to play queen to f6. We're going to attack this bishop. We're going to eye this f2 pawn. We're also going to attack this pawn. We've got threats all over the board. I am so excited to share with you this very hard research lines, brand new. I was researching with Leela, I was researching with Stockfish, I was researching with the database, covering all the things your opponents are most likely to play. Before I go further, this video is probably going to be on the longer side. I don't know that, but you probably do. You can look at how long this is because I have a lot to share with you. Why should you watch this video? Why should you watch this? There's a lot of things out there. Why this? First of all, it is my solemn vow to you that you will be a better chess player by the end of this video. And when I say like better chess player, you're like, oh yeah, you've seen some chess ideas. These are going to be very specific ideas that I've brought from various games that you can translate to your games. These are going to be very specific ideas on how to attack weak squares, on how to go after bishops in these certain scenarios that you guys can bring to your games. That these are not always intuitive ideas, and a lot of them are quite new, and so I'm very excited to share that with you. The other thing is, this is a repertoire to play against the Trompowsky. The Trompowsky is not all that common, but when our opponent plays the Trompowsky, we're in a situation where they probably know more than us, because, you know, you're here, you're probably studying Catalans, you're probably studying you know, C4, Nimzo, Queen's Gambit, whatever it is you play. You take the information advantage back from them. You put them in a situation where they are on the back foot, they don't know what's going on, you do. So even if you only remember X% from this video, you're going to take away the big ideas, certainly, and you will know more than your opponent in this line, which is 0. You will put them in a situation where they are going to be likely to make mistakes. And I'm going to talk about that way of thinking and how that guides all the moves we play, and I'm going to talk about that especially at the end of the video, how I make opening preparation and how you guys can too. That maximizes the chance of my opponent making errors is what really I'm looking for. And the other thing at the end of the video I'm going to talk about is this name right above my head, the Deceiver Gambit, and why I think that's actually a very excellent name. Even though it sounds stupid, I think there's some there's a little bit of an origin story there as well. So without further ado, let's get to these awesome moves that I'm so excited to share with you. This brand new gambit, the Deceiver Gambit against the Trompowsky. Let's go.
William Grave, the Gambit man, takes his seat at the board. E4, E5, Knight F3, Bishop C5. The Bushgas Gambit on the board. On with the Gambit classes. Hero pawn unlocked.
It starts d4, knight f6, bishop to g5. This is the Trompowsky variation. Most common moves here is like d5 or even e6, after which, you know, the point of the Trompowsky is white's going to play bishop g5, and very often like knight d2 kind of, and maybe try and fight for this e4 square. Very often, though, knight e4 is one of the more common moves. And here, actually, I left the database open, so you can see bishop f4 is the most common move, and that's really what we're going to be talking about here. As we get higher, so now I'm going to click on the Masters database, you can see how now it accounts for almost 80% of games, bishop f4, against bishop h4 and this other move h4. At the end of the video, I'm going to touch on bishop h4 and h4, but it's actually really not going to be quite so common. So after knight e4, players play bishop f4, and so now we see a London, like if they play bishop f4 immediately. Now we see, but here they play bishop g5, draw our knight to e4, bishop f4. So what's the point? The point is they want to like kind of, so if you do nothing, they're going to try and play f3 and then e4 to take the whole center, or, you know, they're going to play something like knight d2 to make that quick knight trade, and, you know, just have some nice development. I mean, it's not like a super sharp line in a lot of cases. You know, Trompowsky players are just kind of chilling. Except we are going to play, it doesn't have a name. It doesn't have a name. I looked. We're going to play the crazy Deceiver Gambit. E5. Wow. Okay. What's going on? What's going on? So, okay, I'm actually on the Masters database. You can see there's only 11 games that went way down. In the Lichess database, there's 3,700, which is still a far cry from 942,000. So, E5. What's going on here? Okay. I'm going to touch on bishop takes and pawn takes. Some people are actually even playing this move F3, which I'll note loses very, very quickly. A lot of people like to play F3 even when their bishop's under attack. I'll note that when we cover bishop h4. This is going to lose very quickly. We're just going to take the bishop, take here, and queen to h4 check. You have to watch out anytime you move your f-pawn before you castle, because the point is that if they give the check and they control this g3 square, you're not going to be able to play g3 because of takes and this pin. So here, white has to play king d2, and this is just very, very bad for them. And you'll note here that they have no control over the dark squares, and this is going to be a common theme. Like, for example, this queen can just go wherever it pleases on all the dark squares, and they have lots of issues here. They're without their dark square bishop. They're going to be without their dark square bishop in a lot of these lines. Maybe not as quickly as here. Okay, I need to touch on the most common moves. Eventually, I'm really, really excited to get to what Stockfish recommends for white and what I have in store against that. So the most common move here, bishop takes e5, you see, is a little bit more common than pawn takes e5. And we're going to just play this move, knight to c6. So what's happening here with this move, knight to c6? What are we threatening? A good way to see what we're threatening is if white just plays the third most common move here, knight to f3, in which case they'll probably lose very, very quickly. So we play here just d5. White here plays e3. Not much else to do. And now, as soon as they play e3, what happens is that they're going to cut off this route home. So here, their bishop is actually already verging on trapped. We play this move f6. White should play bishop g3. If they play bishop to f4, it includes g5, and this will be even worse, as you'll see, because after bishop g3, we'll play h5, and as the arrows indicate here, our next move is going to be g5, and we want to play h4, and this is going to be a very, very common theme in this line. The knight will be eyeing the bishop like this, and the pawns will be coming right at this bishop, and the bishop will have nowhere to go, right? So, for example, here, knight d2, this is the move here, or bishop d3, whatever it may be. We play your g5. Now we're threatening to trap this bishop, right? Knight takes doesn't help. Take, h4. These pawns are taking away all these squares for the bishop. When we threaten to trap this bishop, the bishop has but two options, h3 or h4, right? Or sometimes f3. As soon as this pawn now moves, the bishop now wants to get to that square really quickly, but now the pawn is moved, and now this is why we keep the knight here and why it works so well with coming at this guy. We now take on g3, pawn takes g3, because they've played h3, this is very weakened, and we can really just come after this pawn and really come after a lot of squares. So for example, here, a great move is queen to d6. Queen up, because we're going to want to castle this way, so we're going to be castling that way very shortly. g3 is hit. Here in this situation, white has actually no way to defend g3 other than king to f2, and we can actually play a really nice move here, which is just h4, just trying to get our queen to g3 anyway. So like take, we're going to go queen to g3 check in a moment, and we're just going to come bishop out, we're going to castle, we're going to come bishop to h6, we're going to attack this pawn, and white here is up a pawn, but as a almost losing position. Actually, let me keep that eval bar on for you guys, so that you can just kind of see what's going on and see what you're getting into. I'm keeping the database open, keeping the eval bar open, just to be as open as possible. So here, I'll note h4 is just going to be pretty much even worse after takes, and something like queen d6 or bishop d6. Again, forcing king to f2, and then we play this move pawn to g4. So that's going to be kind of the common idea. We're going to be trying to drive that bishop back, and a lot of times just come after it with the pawns, and white's just not going to be able to defend their dark squares. So that's going to be white's issue. So that covers knight to f3. Let's cover now the two most common moves, which are bishop to f4 and bishop to g3, right? So bishop to g3, we are going to play, you guessed it, h5. h5. So we're just trying to come after that bishop. So if they play e3, they're going to lose their bishop very quickly to like something like this, right? They can just run right out of squares just by virtue of coming after it. So basically, in this situation, white's now needs to move a pawn to create a square for the bishop. So the most common move here is this move, pawn to f3, only this can lose very fast. What we do is we take this bishop, pawn takes g3, and now a really nice move. We don't have queen d6, but we have a nice move, queen g5, attacking g3. Again, white has no development other than that dark square bishop, which now just got traded off. They have nobody that can really defend g3 other than their king. Only here, black has a really nice, cute little tactic. You guys can pause the video and try and find it. It is simply knight takes d4, and if queen takes d4, it would be even worse, because bishop to c5, due to the defense of the queen, is now going to pick up the queen. So knight takes d4 here, and black is completely winning. White can be running short on options. Knight to f3 here, I think, yes, it just allows the simple h4, bishop e5, d6, bishop f4, g5. Bishop now at least can run back home. They haven't played e3, but all of white's pieces are just going to get completely run over here. This knight now needs to retreat back. So not a fun situation for them there. White has one good move here. It is this move knight to d2, recommended by the engine. And here we're just going to play a move that we play typically anyway, which is this move pawn to d5, and is now reintroducing all these same threats. h4, f6, g5, we want to run that bishop right out of squares. White should take on e4, pawn takes e4. And now, in addition to the h4 threats, we're also looking at this d4 pawn. So for example, if white just plays here something like e3, we can play h4, bishop f4, g5, and run this guy out of squares, bishop e5, f6. White here has one more cute little option, which is d5. I included this just in the notes. It's probably their best thing they can do in this situation, because their bishop is very short on squares. So d5 is something they can do to try and make the knight move, and then play bishop to e5 and survive. Unfortunately for them, this is not going to be a pretty situation because they have no development. What we can do is we can make this trade. Queen takes d1, rook takes d1, pawn takes e6, pawn takes f4. So everything kind of just trades off there, as you see. And after rook b8, all these situations end up really nice for us because we get a really nice bishop pair, and white has no development in any of these lines. They have not brought out their king side at all. We're attacking this pawn. b3 now obliges the king to come up to e2, which is going to be very bad. So black here has tons of compensation for the pawn. As you can see, the eval bar swinging up into black's favor after rook to b8, attacking this b2 pawn, leaving white in a tough spot. So that's just a fun line here after e3. White has some better moves. So one option they have, as you can see, is the most common, tied with e3 actually, is this move d5. Trying to make this knight move and trying to create this square. So already white was in a situation where after pawn takes e4, they had d4 under attack. So what to do, right? So d5 here, attacking our knight, and they think, okay, the knight moves, then maybe c4, and then the bishop has a square that it can run away. Unfortunately, we have here a really nice move, and it is just h4. It is just h4. And I'll get. Let me actually get to this pawn takes c6 line second, because I just think it's so pretty. If white just plays bishop to f4 now we can proceed with this move knight to b4, attacking this pawn. White has but one way to defend it, and it's going to have a tempo on the bishop, so it's going to be a disaster if we take it. White needs to play this move c4 to protect. Now queen to f6. Just some filthy lines here. Attacking f4, attacking b2. This is a common idea that we employ in the Von Popiel Gambit. We're going to employ in this line and that en passant line. Queen to f6, attacking multiple things. I'll just continue to show you the rest of this line. It's with queen d2, and the point is we have this filthy move e3. Just discoordinating the bishop from the queen trying to defend both b2 and e3. The point is now if queen takes e3, it is check, but after we shield that check, white just cannot defend everything. They have not touched anything on this whole king side, so that is why we're being really quick, right? If we were slow, if we played bishop e7, maybe white can consolidate, they can play e3, they can play h3 to get a square here, and they'd be okay. But here, white has no pieces in the game, so if we're able to strike quickly, they have nobody available for defense. Queen takes e3, check, bishop e7. We're threatening knight c2 now that we've brought the queen away. Knight c2 would fork a lot of things. And here, just really no good option because bishop f5 is also going to be incoming to support knight c2. And if rooks to c1, we have this nice move, knight takes a2, where the rook is hit. The rook needs to defend queen takes b2 coming. Like rook a1, for example, queen takes b2 would be a disaster. But if the rook moves to b1 to protect that, then there's bishop to f5 attacking the rook. So really just all of black's pieces working beautifully, whereas white's pieces, it's just very, very hard to orchestrate defenses against everything incoming here. For example, rook c1, we can still go knight c2 check. Or somehow that's not the move. But, oh yeah, just knight takes a2, threatening bishop to b4, pinning, winning the queen, which I believe is going to be the line in bishop takes e3. What we can do is, yes, bishop to f5, threatening knight c2, rook c1, knight takes a2. These are such creative ideas that we can use because our opponent's king is in the center. So we have all these additional resources. They're not castled. They don't have a knight on c3 to block this. So we have this really, really nice resource where the knight on b4 and the rook on a1, this is a really nice pattern to know, threatening knight c2, and when the rook comes to c1, then we take a2, tempoing the rook. The knight there can be very, very, very bothersome. And in this situation, the knight is still supporting bishop to b4, which will win white's queen. So really, really nice line. We went down a little bit of a rabbit hole here. I'll get back to this, at least in the realm of games. So instead of bishop to f4, where we were talking about knight to b4, attacking d5, queen to f6, and then attacking everything over here, instead of that, white can make this trade by pawn takes c6, only we still have nasty, nasty tricks in this endgame. So we're going to trade queens, because we don't want our opponent to capture on d8, which would force us to go king takes d8, which is never really fun to do. So king takes d8. Now we take on g3. So they took the knight, we took a bishop. We are pinning this h2 pawn to the rook, so must take f takes g3. And now a really, really nice move just to absolutely kill white's kingside development. It is this move, e3. E3, just stopping that pawn from moving, and this pawn also is going to have a hard time moving. So how does the bishop get out? So how does the rook get out? Really, really nice stuff. They can take b7, but after bishop takes b7, white is just basically going to be playing without a rook and without a bishop. That's like 8 points of material that they're going to be playing without for very, very long. And that also leaves the king in a very, very vulnerable spot, such that rook b8, if we can provoke b3, bishop to b4 check, will leave the king basically out of squares. So a really, really just brilliant move here, e3, just so tying white down. They can play rook d3, we just defend it no matter. So I thought that was a really, really nice line. It really demonstrates how poorly white controls the dark squares as soon as we take that dark square bishop off the board. So we got into this line by talking about bishop takes e5, knight to c6, bishop to g3. Bishop needs to retreat somewhere, right? Or we're talking about bishop g3, we're going to talk about bishop f4. Bishop to g3, we're going to play h5, coming after him. If f3, we're going to take on g3 and queen to g5 with this neat little trick of bishop to c5. If knight to f3, we can just kind of basically win that bishop. Or if anything else, same deal with e3. If knight to d2, we're going to play d5. They take. And here, we talked about e3 and how, again, we win the bishop. We talked about d5 and our nice resource with h4. White has one very good move, and is this move c3. And in 19 games, it has never been played. So c3, and you'll note this pattern that the engine continues to recommend. It is with delaying e3 and continuing to recommend c3 as a means to defend d4. Why? The point is so the bishop actually can run home, so that the bishop doesn't get trapped. e3 cuts the bishop's escape rate. Otherwise, he's going to be running out of squares, and you're going to have to get into these complicated lines with d5, h4, and things go badly when then you're forced to make this trade. So the bishop here, so c3. So there were two options. So the options to defend are e3 and d5, or so people thought, or just h3 and then losing this pawn, as you see some people playing, in which case white is just much worse. They're without their extra pawn. c3, so the bishop can run home. So white has no development, but they're not losing their bishop, and they're not losing anything imminently. Simply here, if white finds all these stockfish moves, which nobody ever has, we play this move queen to e7, which is a nice move, and all we're going to do is castle long, which will always be safe and available to us in every line here. Our king is always going to be safe. We're at most risking one pawn. We get this bishop out, we can play f5, we can roll with those pawns, we have a nice bishop pair. White is going to have a pretty difficult time finding some squares for these pieces, because these pawns can roll and can take away almost every square that say this knight can go to. So an interesting position here where black has some compensation for the pawn, but but the engine prefers white slightly. So that covers bishop to g3. White has this other move, slightly more common than bishop to g3, which is bishop back to f4. So right back to where it came from. Played bishop takes e5, knight to c6, started to put pressure on that bishop. Bishop comes right back to f4, getting out of the way of that. What to do? We play here simply d5, and already we've set a really, really difficult trap. So with this move d5, right, you see, if you're white, you just really probably see no problem. You took e5, they played a developing move, you went back. Oh, there is no trick, they just played d5. I'll continue to just do my thing and play pawn to e3. You guys might be able to guess the next move at this moment. They played pawn to e3, they cut their route home. That is what we were waiting for. And now we strike. g5. g5, bishop must come back to g3. Bishop to e5, I'll note, has been played a couple times. We don't really want to go f6 with queen to h5 check possible. There were sometimes we played f6 where the pawn was on h5 or h4, in which case the rook was able to take away queen to h5 check. So here it would be annoying. But guys, remember, we're only down one pawn. So if you just take this and then just like play bishop to g7 and then you're grabbing that back, right? So knight f3 here, there's g4. This knight continues to dominate the whole board untouched. And bishop takes e5, you'll have total domination over dark squares here, and you'll just up a pawn. This is just much better for black. So that's not really possible. White should try to keep the bishop on the board with bishop to g3. And now the classic idea, we go right back to it. This is following the most common move train, by the way. Everything is bishop takes e5 was most common, bishop to f4 is most common. They're moving their bishop for, they've now made 7 moves in this game. 5 of them have been with this bishop. That's not going to be the end of it, because after h5, we are threatening to trap this bishop. You guys guessed it, h5. This is the exact pattern that we go to. This is our go-to. Knight pressuring the bishop, pawns coming at it, and now they're going to have to touch either this pawn or this pawn, after which we take it, and g3 becomes very, very soft. So we'll look at a couple things here. f3, most common move train. Let's keep going down it. Here, almost everyone's playing knight takes g3, which is not a bad move. But after pawn takes g3, we play queen d6 or bishop d6, attacking this. But remember in that other line where they had to play king f2 to defend it? Here, their pawn's on e3, so they can play knight e2. So, like, things could be worse for them, right? Maybe they'll even be able to castle and make it out alive. So things could be worse. They can. This is worse. h4. h4. A beautiful, beautiful counterattack. I'll touch on f takes e4, but let's keep going down most common move train. It is with bishop to f2. Now we take it. Now we take it, and now their first move of the game with a piece other than the dark square bishop is the king. That's what I like to see. King takes f2. And here, black has a very nice move, which is this nice move, queen to f6, which I like, which is where I'll end my theory largely, with white just in a disastrous situation with g4 about to roll all over them, bishop to d6 and g3 check. Absolutely nasty stuff. Black will simply be able to move their bishop and castle queenside with a beautiful position with targets all over the board, g4, and white's king completely exposed. So a really, really fun position. For example, c3, I think we can just keep rolling g4. I see 2 out of 3 games there with c3, g4. Great position for black, bishop to d6, g3 check. Just terrible things going on for the white position. So fun stuff. Let's go backwards step by step. So in this position, we talked about bishop to f2. White has here another option, which is pawn takes e4. But after pawn takes g3, things are quite bad. This is a brutal pin onto that h-pawn. What can you do? You can play h3, and I believe we can just even just grab pawn takes e4 here. And we are equal in pawns. But again, white's in a situation where they haven't moved any pieces other than their dark square bishop. We can even here just play f5 and very safely castle our king queenside if we can't knock them out even faster than that, maybe with f4. So white can't make that trade either. Typically, knight for bishop trades end very poorly for them because they are not controlling so many squares around their king side. That white here didn't really have many other options. There's h3 and there's h4 in addition to f3, but these will end very poorly as well. So you can see here with this move h4, trying to create a square for their bishop, right? So to not get trapped immediately, all we need to do is take it. And these things can really demonstrate just how strong these lines are. So with pawn takes h4, white can lose very quickly if they play something like rook takes h4. Because here after bishop to d6, we attack... Oh, is that not the move? I think it is bishop to g4 here, perhaps. Bishop to g4. Very, very nice move. Attacking the queen. And next move, we're going to play bishop to d6, attacking this g3 pawn, which is going to be very, very difficult to defend very quickly. The rook on h4 not doing too much, just boxed in by this bishop and this pawn as we attack the queen here. White is also going to have a very difficult time castling long with that bishop being able to stop that. So pawn takes h4 is just a little bit better. But here we play bishop to h6. We can mix it up. As soon as this diagonal opens up, e3 becomes very difficult to protect if you're white. It just does. Queen comes there, queen can come here and simply take on e3. If queen takes h5, looks like a nice pin. We have this nice move, queen to e7, and just a total disaster for white all the way around. Even though we're down several pawns, you'll note that knight takes d4 is coming because of this pin, and we're going to take e3. In addition to doing several other things like queen c1 check and take b2, anything that's a dark square, we can take. It's all ours because they don't have their dark square bishop. We're going to castle, after which this rook will defend this rook, and bishop takes e3 will start more stuff onto this poor white queen. So lots and lots of fun stuff as soon as you get rid of that dark square bishop. Be sure to play bishop to h6, to play queen d6, to play queen everywhere. Hit all this stuff as fast as you can. So white had one more option in this position, which was this move pawn to h3. And we can play here knight takes g3 and bishop to d6, but we can play it even more precisely, actually, with this move bishop to b4 check. So white here cannot block with the knight because of this knight controlling all of these squares. They must play this move pawn to c3, after which we now take g3, tempo on the rook, so they can't take here. Takes and bishop d6, so this is a little bit more precise than just takes and bishop to d6, because what we did is we provoked this move c3, taking away knight c3. This is an added level of subtlety that you don't necessarily need, but I like showing you guys all the ideas in this position, so I keep showing you guys games where they've been played. Queen to f3 here is maybe white's best bet to try and guard g3, but here black has another great idea, which is this great move rook to h6. I love this and how this everything can come into play. We want to come after white as quickly as we can before they've gotten this stuff out. And so something with that rook h6 does is it threatens to swing over rook f6, which chases the queen away from bishop takes g3 check, which would be very, very devastating to white's position. And the other thing it does, like let's say even like knight e2 or something to support this, so rook f6, maybe they can take h5. The other thing it does is this other really, really nice trick. This is also some very cool patterns to know, is this move bishop to g4. Crazy move. White can't take queen takes d5, another very important pattern to know, because if bishop takes g3 check, winning the white queen in this position, a nice use of discovered check, even though that's not a safe square, we win the queen. And the point of bishop g4 is that if they take it, we take, and now our rook's on h6, not h8. If rook takes h8 was check, we would lose. But here, we're in a situation where we actually win. We're going to pick up that white rook. This queen needs to move, and then we take that rook. And otherwise in this situation, so takes, right? If our rook was still on h8, we would be losing because they would take it. Otherwise here, takes, rook h8 check, we can block it, and so here we've won the queen. And otherwise they need to move this, and we are now up a rook. And otherwise, if they move this queen, we now play rook f6, chase the queen all the way to g1, now take it, and now take this pawn on g3. So just really nice patterns all over the board that become possible due to the activity of black's pieces and the opposite of the case on white's pieces. So Nf and 82, always remember, like, if all else fails, you can play bishop f5, queen e7, castle your king, just have a really, really nice, pleasant position while white struggles to, like, defend the e3 pawn. Because they don't have a dark square bishop. Like, how are you defending the e3 pawn? Like, are you going to move your king again? I think that's kind of what you have to do. And otherwise, you're just going to castle and be very safe over here in all cases. Whereas white is struggling, like, how do I defend this e3 pawn? How do I defend this g3 pawn? It becomes very, very annoying as soon as we get rid of that dark square bishop, which will happen. So d5 here. We touched on here e3 and the idea of just g5 and h5 coming after this guy. White here has a couple other options. So you see here the second most common move is f3, and here black has a very, very nice resource. which is this move, bishop to d6. Just a really, really nice move. So the point is that if they take, now after bishop takes f4, white has the common disaster of not having a dark square bishop, and we are threatening, for example, something like this. We're threatening queen to h4 check, and we have this nasty pin because we control the g3 square. So here white is losing. White should probably take bishop takes d6, but after knight takes d6, we have now traded dark square bishop for dark square bishop, but white has this very stupid move f3 that they've played. And so, for example, here knight c3, the most common move, we put our knight on f5, and now, again, we're threatening queen h4 check because on g3, we're going to play knight takes g3, right? You'll note here something like this. White is not in time to castle. They have to deal with this check. If they play g3, we take it with the pin on that rook. They cannot recapture here. So anytime you move the f-pawn, we're looking to control that square and come out with queen to h4 check. And otherwise, if they stop that, then honestly, simply something like castles. We want to play knight e3. We want to just play knight takes d4, get our pawn back, play rook e8. Knight on e3 can probably live there forever and cut castling both ways. Again, white's issues are on dark squares in every case. They can't defend h4, they can't defend g3, they can't defend e3, they can't defend d4. Where, oh where is their dark square bishop? It got traded off because that's what we're going for. So f3, not playable either. White's best move is this very rare move, c3. Not playing e3, but playing c3 so that the bishop has a route home. All we need to do here is queen to f6, which is going to be a very, very nice prelude to our next our next topic, which is the en passant thing, which is just absolutely crazy stuff. Some of the most crazy stuff that Stockfish. I'm excited to tackle what Stockfish has to say about this. But queen to f6, so we're hitting the bishop. We're threatening to take on f2, and this is just a really tough situation for white. e3 looks natural. It looks like they have like a very, very nice, solid London setup. But the issue is that they don't have that we have so much more development, right? So we play something here like bishop to d6. If they take it, they get checkmated. So lots of pressure here. We're threatening to just take and kind of win a pawn. And we're also threatening, so for example, like knight e2, if you're protecting that further, we can play here g5 and we're just winning this bishop. Because bishop can't move because of checkmate. And if bishop g3, now we're there, not take with the knight, but take with the bishop, so someone still attacks mate, so they cannot recapture because of checkmate. So bishop to d6, really, really rough situation for them. Bishop to g3, and I think we just need to keep coming after this guy with like something like h5, bishop to d6. Tough stuff dealing with this poor bishop is overwhelmed in every line. I think here maybe bishop d6 is better. So c3, it's still the best choice because you're not losing your bishop, but that doesn't mean, you know, he can't do it all. He cannot do it all. So bishop takes e5. We have seen that after knight c6, white gets in hot water very, very quickly. I'll cover here the fourth most common move, knight to d2, which is Stockfish's recommendation, very briefly. Knight to d2, all we're going to play here is d5. The point of knight d2 is that it quickly can trade off for this guy, right? Because so they can't play f3 in these lines because we're going to play knight takes e5 and simply queen to h4 check with the knight controlling the g3 square. They can't kick us out. And pawn takes e4 similarly ends very poorly for them, that we're having a tempo on the rook. So they can't play f3, so the quickest way they can get rid of this very, very powerful knight that's pressuring f2, pressuring g3, causing all these problems, is this move knight d2 and simply taking it. They can't move their bishop back in this situation because they're going to lose their extra pawn. And if they play something like e3, all we need to do is simply slide our queen out the way, and we'll introduce some other threats. So in addition to trying to take this bishop, when the bishop retreats, we have this idea of queen b4 check to take on b2. This is maybe one of the better ways for white to play because they are all right in this line, but it's going to be very tricky for them to castle nonetheless, whereas our castling job is much easier. So against knight d2, we're never really touching this knight. We're never like really moving backwards with this knight. All we want to do is play this nice move d5, after which we can play pawn takes e4, which is always quite nice to open the queen onto this. White here should play e3 and queen to e7, threatening to take twice on e5, or to play queen b4 check and grab our pawn back. So bishop takes e5 gets the bishop into hot water. After knight c6, the bishop should retreat to one of these squares, but after bishop to f4, d5, it runs into issues with g5 and h4 and queen to f6, or after bishop to g3 runs into issues with h5. White here has another option, which is this move pawn takes e5, which is Stockfish's slight preference. And we are going to play the most epic baity move of all time, the most bait move, d5. And it's not just bait. It's not just bait. And I'll talk about pawn takes d6 and how hard it might be to resist the temptation to en passant. You see here, most people are doing pawn takes d6. We have this really, really nice move, queen to f6. Lots and lots of fun lines there. Well, let's talk about everything that isn't pawn takes d6 first. And first, to demonstrate just the power of this position, let's look at just a common move like knight to f3. What's the problem? Now we have some interesting resources. So we have this idea, bishop to c5. New stuff because pawn takes e5 is different. Like, we didn't have this diagonal before, but a lot of the same ideas of squares we're working with around this knight. So with bishop to c5, we're looking at f2. White here should play this move pawn to e3. And we're going to come after this bishop, g5. We've seen this before. Even better, this pawn's on e5. We don't even have to deal with bishop e5 and f6. Bishop should retreat, and here we play h5, coming after this bishop, trying to trap it. White here needs to move this h-pawn. We've seen this pattern before. They move it, we take it, they take it. Lots of soft targets. And here, even better than bishop takes e3, is another nice resource that will be common in pawn takes e5 positions, is this move c6. Really, really nice resource in pawn takes e5 positions because the queen is so powerful on b6. The queen is going to try to take b2, okay, let's say c6. What would you even recommend for white? Maybe queen d2 to guard this. Now queen b6 comes, threatening b2, very difficult to guard, and also bishop takes e3 is going to be absolutely devastating in these lines. So, and also our queen side is so solid. Like, at any point, if we want to go here in castles, so easy to do. So really, really fun stuff. c6, really nice move. Queen to b6, just total domination over the dark squares in these lines. White here can play h4, doesn't change too much. We take g3, and play g4, which is what they're asking us to do. After h4, we play here this move g4, knight d4, and we continue picking up pawns with queen to e7. Just one of the ways to do it. Queen takes e5, we're looking at all these pawns, after which we're not even going to be down a pawn, and white is probably again going to have to play king f2 as their only way to fortify their dark squares. I don't know how else they guard e3 and g3 in positions like this. So, fun stuff. White should not play knight f3. It's like a natural looking move, not a good one. Okay, what can white do instead? White here has this other interesting move, f3. Or let's talk here about knight d2 first, actually. Knight d2 is a pretty good move, and I think it was one of Stockfish's recommendations. Knight d2, we're going to play this move. You'll note this is going to be quite common anytime queen trades are incoming on this file. Something we'd like to do against pawn, so this is against the pawn takes e5 lines, because that's where queen trades become incoming. What we want to do is this nice move, queen to e7. And with what queen to e7 does is set up some of our other ideas, which is queen to b4 check, looking at the b2 pawn, as is highlighted by these arrows. So with knight d2, it's a good move. They want to be able to take e4 and take e4. And now we have this idea, as is noted by the arrows, so if white plays something like e3, we play queen to b4 check. So without this knight, we can't really go after this bishop the same way, right? So like e3, so if we go after this bishop, it doesn't do anything. They can play h3, and we're not trapping this guy. If we had in here knight takes g3, that would be very good. But that's why white's last move of playing knight d2, getting rid of that knight just in time, now their bishop is going to be safe, just being a normal bishop and defending e5. We can still play like this, but it's not the best. So e3, but in this position, the other resource we have is queen to b4 check. So knight d2, it takes some time. It gives us the opportunity to prepare this. Queen to b4 check, and we can just take b2, and we're doing fine. So here white has a couple other resources. There's this other move, c3, that you see is the most common move, to take away queen b4. And now we can play, anyway, g5, attacking the bishop, forcing it back to g3. And again, h5 doesn't yield us anything, because they can play h3. We don't have a knight to take it. Bishop is guarding this. However, we've chased the bishop off of another square. They played c3 to guard this, but they haven't played yet e3. e3 to really shut in their development, and again, to make things hard. And it might seem like craziness on both sides, like, oh, we play g5, we play e3, craziness on both sides. Our side will always be able to play knight c6, bishop d7 in castles. Always. They cannot. Right? So if pawn takes here, something we can do, simply knight c6, knight f3, bishop g7, and look at this position. So we're just going to grab e5, after which we'll only be down one pawn. These pawns can harass these pieces. And all we're going to do is bishop d7, castles. So, we need to put the bishop there to legally castle. But then our rook will go to d8, attacking this. and it will be hard for white to be able to castle along. We're going to take e5, and the e3 pawn will also be toast, and it's very, very annoying for them to get these pieces out, because everything's in the way of this poor light square bishop, which you have not seen moved in any of these lines. So a tough situation for them there. After e3, white's best move is queen to d4, so that they can play queen takes f2. Nobody's going to find this, but we play bishop to g7, and as the arrows indicate, this pawn is ours anyway. Bishop to e6, knight d7. Don't say I don't cover white's best options, but we are going to play bishop e6, knight d7. We are going to be winning this pawn, after which castles, and we can even look at h5, h4 as an idea as well. But really, really nice bishops streaking down these diagonals against white's king, which is probably going to be castled there. I can't imagine that they get out the other way. So queen to d4 is a good resource for them in that position. Queen to d4 is also a good resource for white in this position. Queen to d4 it being the best move. It's something they can do right away, trying to prepare their castle and take away queen b4. This is, I think, fully all of Stockfish's recommendations. Pawn takes e5, knight to d2, and queen to d4. We're following it. We play here this move g5, attacking the bishop. Where does the bishop go? 2 out of 2 people played this move bishop to g3, which is a very poor move. You can see the eval bar shift. Bishop to g3, even though it is natural, somehow the correct move was bishop to d2, not playing e3 and playing bishop back. The reason is a little complex. We play this move knight c6. Now if they take e4, so if they went anywhere else, we're going to play this move e3 and shove this right back in their face, and this is going to be a nasty situation for white, having to deal with these tripled pawns that are all, we can eat them whenever we feel like it. If they take e4, now we play this really nice move f5, and we are winning this bishop, because if they en passant now, they lose their queen, and any other queen move doesn't matter. We play f4, trapping the bishop this way before they can create a square. So really, really nice stuff. So that's why bishop to g3 is a mistake. If you really want to follow all the Stockfish recommendations, you're already by move 8 in a position that has not been played in all of the infinite games played on Lichess. This hasn't even been played. I'll cover it anyway. Bishop to d2. Let's go, Stockfish, me and you. Bishop to f5 we can play here, protecting our pawn. If white here plays the natural move, just e3, just trying to develop, again, they'll lose their advantage because bishop to g7 will just eliminate this pawn. Knight to c6 is not something we want to play yet, and that's another reason why e3 makes a lot of sense. Knight to c6 can be met with bishop to b5 with this annoying pin. Even though knight to c6 makes a lot of sense because we want to take the queen, we want to attack the queen, and we want to play knight takes e5. But here, yeah, bishop to g7, and we'll simply get our pawn back. So white should play. Even better is this move e6, something they can do to preserve their pawn, trying to attack the rook. So we slide out the way, rook g8, take. You'll never get this in the game, but I'll just show you. e3 now, so that they can counter knight c6 with bishop to b5. And here we have this other nice resource, which is this move rook to g6. This is as far as I'll go. I'm already way past any game that's ever been played, but I had to tackle what Stockfish was saying. Rook to g6 is a really nice resource because rook takes c6 is now going to be really strong against white's king. That's probably going to castle that way. And so a6 is something we can force them to take, because if they lose this pin, they'll lose their queen. And in addition, we have other nice ways to attack the queen, because rook d8 and rook d6 coming can put a lot of pressure on this d file. So already, Stockfish says that this is almost +1, but this looks like a pretty tough situation for white to be playing. In my opinion, this queen is way too far out and can be attacked by the knight, the bishop, both rooks, lots and lots of things, and doesn't have that many squares. Anyway, I like this rook g6 resource, really coming across ready to play rook takes c6 instead of this very awkward pawn takes c6, and also this rook d6 resource to put a lot of pressure down this file. So you'll never get this in a game, but this is really, really nice ideas to know. And also rook g6, it threatens queen e5. We have rook e6, a great resource, because remember that knight is pinned. Okay, this will never happen, but we've covered this move knight to d2, which is this nice idea for white to try and eliminate this knight that causes all of the problems in the position, right? So like we talked about this, like if just e3, right? I haven't even looked at e3, but I'm assuming these are the right moves, and they are, because we are going after this bishop. Now we're threatening h4. If they play h3, we take it, and then we proceed to win all of these pawns. A nice move in these positions almost always is c6, threaten queen b6, which, all these pawns are ripe for the taking. You can play your bishops to c5 and attack this. I'm sure bishop to g7, knight c6, any of these moves are good. So white should eliminate this knight so that in this position, right, this is the basic idea, that they can play h3 without having to deal with this. So knight d2 was one way to eliminate the knight. We play here queen e7, after which we have a lot of nice resources there. The other way that they can try to eliminate this is this move f3, the third most common move. f3 seems to drive this knight right back. We don't have queen to h4 check because g3, and white retains control of this very important square every time you move your f-pawn. We can't take it. Bishop takes g3. They will not lose their rook. So after f3, we need to come up with some other idea. I think you guys might be able to guess the idea. We don't really want to move our knight back. Most people here are blundering their knight or moving their knight back. But how about that third most common move, g5, coming after this bishop? So most people here play the disastrous choice of making this trade. When will they learn? White without the dark square bishop just cannot defend their king. We are coming queen to h4 check. We're very, very ready to do it. If we continue to follow the most common move train, it is pawn takes d5, and it is queen to h4 check. And white here has to move their king, and after just something like bishop to c5, white is going to get mated very, very shortly. I have here some other lines I've given. So kings to c1, check, knight to d2, and queen to d8. Oh, yes, this was really, really nice. Just demonstrating just how absolutely dominant this dark square bishop is and how white can do nothing to make that move. So it is with this line. So white here after bishop c5. So bishop e3 check would force that king forward. So king c1 I think makes a lot of sense to try to play knight d2 and try to have some semblance of a game even though you're not moving any of these pieces. Queen to d8. Really just trying to use this d-file as quickly as possible, trying to take d5, put pressure on the pin piece. White here can try c4 to try and hold it, but we play here c6, again, trying to open this. They play d6, we can just play f6. It's so funny how open we can leave our king because our opponent just has nothing. This bishop completely kills them. So the point is we just want to take, and then bring our rook to d8 and just kill that poor knight stuck in this pin forever. So just some really pretty lines here. And g3, of course, loses to pawn takes g3. Knight to f3 they can try to play, but we have this nice move g2 check. Takes, and now we've won a rook. We got our queen back, but we also took a rook. So this move of pawn takes d5 is not a good one. Queen to h4 is very, very strong, and the bishop will sit on e3, just completely dominating the whole board because there is no dark square counterpart in these lines. Queen takes d5 doesn't end much better for white. Queen to h4 check is something we play anyway. They can play king d1, but now we are going to focus on getting a rook to d8 ASAP, and white is kind of toasted here. Knight to f3, they can play a tempo on the queen. Simply slide the queen back. Bishop to d7 if you want to castle. Otherwise, if you just want a rook to d8 and try to win the queen as quickly as possible, then move your bishop somewhere else. And this is very, very good stuff for black. White's best move in this position is to take away queen to h4 altogether. They should play this move here, knight to f3, to stop this move, queen to h4 check. Now, black here has, I think, what would be considered a very obvious move of just pawn takes e4. But we're not interested in trading queens. This would actually be a very poor decision. We're not interested in trading queens when white's king is actually so unsafe. And their king is so unsafe because they cannot defend any of these squares. So something we can do, very much in the spirit of this position, is play this absolutely nasty move. It's been played one time before out of the 30 people who've had this position. c6. c6. The point being pawn takes d5. We're just going queen to b6, attacking b2. Let's say b3. We play now bishop to c5. We're all of a sudden threatening literally checkmate. If they move here, check and mate. So it is just so difficult for white to defend these squares around their king. It is like almost impossible. And at the very least, like this bishop can just live on e3 after like doing, let's like queen d2 to create a square. Our bishop will now live on the e3 square, and our rook will slide to d8 very, very quickly. And white has absolutely no game because these are totally shut out. They never move. Like we've looked at so many moves. In literally none of those lines has white ever been able to touch these pieces. It gets very difficult for them very quickly without the dark square bishop. They cannot get anything else out. They cannot move these light square pawns onto dark squares. So with g5 here, white cannot play pawn takes e4 as is the most common and allow this move pawn takes f4. Bishop to g3 is similarly a very poor choice. All we need to do is take that guy and then just go after this guy with something like bishop to g7. White here needs to find these crazy stockfish moves. So the second most common move is this move bishop to c1, just all the way back. And now our knight is attacked, so we play knight c5. Okay, they went back, we can go back, and they played this stupid move f3. They have everything back here. And as the arrows indicate, bishop to g7, knight c6, this pawn isn't going anywhere. It is ours for the taking. We play bishop to e6 to defend d5. We take that pawn, we castle long, and we are in a really, really nice position where it's difficult for white to develop. White here has a slightly better move, and it is this move, bishop to e3. Very, very difficult stockfish move. Now the point is that when we retreat this knight to c5, it's defended, we're good. White does not want to make that trade. They can play your knight to c3 without dealing with d4. So bishop e3 very unnatural because it blocks this, but white was not really getting that anyway and just needs to focus on making it out alive, just castling before, you know, the whole center collapses on them. So knight c3 is something they can do now because we don't have this move d4. If they find all this, all we're going to do is play this move bishop to e6. We're already in a situation where there's no more games. Bishop to e6, defending d5. Queen to d2. Here we can even play a nice little gambit, so they're actually going to be ready to castle. We play knight c6, threatening d4, giving this pawn on g5. Bishop to e7, take, and we're going to take that pawn on e5. We're going to castle, and our rook on the d file is going to support d4 very, very well. And it might be tough for white because they have these pieces, and f3 is a stupid move that they've played, and so, again, it might be difficult for them to control the dark squares when we can put a very strong pawn on d4. But this is one of the better ways for white to play, but they need to find this really, really tricky move, bishop to e3, a very, very precise square. Okay, bishop to e3. We have touched on, so we've touched on here, f3, knight to f3, knight to d2. Queen to e7, we remember that. So that leaves the really, really exciting and the actual most likely thing your opponent will do. Pawn takes d6, after which we play this nasty move, queen to f6. I've shown this idea of bringing the bishop out and queen to f6. This idea has been in a few of my Gambit videos. So even, you'll note another one against d4. So my idea against the Budapest was this move f6. I have another video on this where queen takes f6 causes a lot of problems on f4 and b2 where the bishop comes here. It's a pretty nice and tricky resource. In the Von Popiel Gambit, for white in the Von Popiel Gambit, this line where we play bishop to g5 before f3, because here black is most likely to play bishop to f5 to defend this. Now we play f3, and instead of knight takes, we play queen takes f3, attacking here and attacking here. So really tricky stuff, and they're very, very difficult to deal with. So if you're a fan of my Gambit repertoire, you've seen this idea before. You probably are familiar with some of the ideas, or at least more so than your opponent. So let's get back to this. It is with d4, knight f6, bishop to g5, knight e4, bishop to f4, e5, and with pawn takes e5, d5. Taking the space here, again, we're ready for g5, h5, h4, now that we have our knight supported. If knight to d2, we're ready to play queen to e7, and d5, we take a nice stake in the center. If f3, we're ready to play g5 anyway. And if pawn takes d6, we are going to play queen to f6. So pawn takes d6 is already a mistake, and in this position, it's not even like white has some great thing that they can find. Your opponent will probably think for a while, and there's really nothing great for them to find. So just to demonstrate the true, just overwhelming power of this position, I'll start with maybe one of the more obvious choices, which is just like, okay, the bishop's attacked, it retreats to a square that still, you know, doesn't get mated right away. Okay, queen takes b2. How bad can it be? It's kind of far from the king, right? Well, we're looking at this rook. White can play pawn takes c7, and this will actually just get them mated in 5. They can throw this in because takes, so they'll like kind of not lose a rook. But pawn takes c7 will actually just get them checkmated very fast. Here we play bishop to b4. White plays here knight d2, pawn c3 wasn't any better. Takes, knight takes, queen takes. Our knight controls all these dark squares. This bishop is far from helping on the dark squares. This is checkmate. So here knight d2. This is also going to be checkmate. We can take this and come back check and checkmate here. So some nice, pretty little patterns around here because, you know, they just don't have the support on this side of the board. Knight to d2. At least, you know, there's no bishop to b4 check, but this is similarly going to be quite bad. We take d2 using the fact that the queen needs to defend the rook. So knight d2 was a way for, you know, also to try and not lose rook. So they must play king takes d2, queen to d4 check. We keep dancing on the dark squares. King to c1 will lose the rook immediately. King to e1 will lose the rook almost immediately. They now must play queen to d2. They don't have a knight on f3 to come here. They don't have a bishop to come here. They got nothing. They must play queen to d2. We take the rook, and now we're just up a rook. So cute little stuff there. So I just showed the bishop to g3 line. I'm going to show the three more common moves than bishop to g3 now. So let's work our way up. Let's talk about queen to c1, trying to hold the bishop in place there. Queen to c1 makes a lot of sense because queen takes b2, we've seen how devastating that can be, just opening this diagonal right onto that king. Queen to c1 trying to fortify everything. Unfortunately, they can't defend everything. We now play bishop takes d6, which is a really, really nice move because it just recaptures our pawn, develops a piece, and attacks a pinned piece, right? So now the bishop cannot take here because this is going to be mating. They haven't even developed the knight to defend that. So bishop takes d6 is now threatening to just win that bishop. What to do if you're white? If you play e3, you're still going to lose that bishop. We play g5, attacking it. If it moves, that's going to be checkmate. If it moves there, you can't defend it because we play bishop takes g3 while the knight still supports us on f2. So g5 now will win the bishop. So white can't play e3. They can try this move bishop to e3, which is tied for the most common with e3. Bishop to e3, not like you're surviving, but it's still so bad. Like your moves that you've played here were queen c1 and bishop to e3. Yes, you've defended f2, you've defended b2, but your position is so bad. So knight c6, knight f3, bishop to g4. Just wanted to show an example of a couple moves. So here, yeah, knight f3 is the most common move, the bishop to g4. How do you move anything if you're white here? If you play g3, you will lose to bishop takes f3, and otherwise we're going to castle. We're going to bring this rook to e8. All of our pieces scream down the middle of the board, and white is in a pretty rough situation here because it's unclear how they can bring any other pieces out, whereas our rooks will come down the middle of the board, and this looks like a great platform for like a weekly Gambit Genius video and a great game to be played there. So bishop to e3, no, does not lose immediately, but will lose soon enough because this is the exact sort of positions that you want to be playing if you're black, where your opponent is just so stuck. They have no development. Their king is stuck in the middle of the board, whereas all of our pieces are doing excellent. Our king is safe. Our rooks have the open files, and eventually, you know, there will be a knockout blow soon enough onto white's king. So imagine something like knight e5 to put even more pressure right there, or something like that. So in this position, queen to c1 doesn't lose immediately, but not the best. White here can also try this move e3 to support this bishop, and all we need to do is now just take b2, as you probably guessed. Remember here, g5 is not going to be winning the bishop. Bishop to g3 is something they can play. Knight takes, pawn takes, they're fine. We need a bishop to be able to capture on g3, so g5 doesn't yield us anything. So we play here queen takes b2, threatening to try to win this rook. Here I've covered knight d2 and pawn takes c7. Pawn takes c7 is a very poor choice. All we need to do now is just come out, bishop to b4 check. This opened right there. With pawn takes c7, you need to watch out, actually, that they are threatening queen d8. So something you can do that's almost always a good response is just knight c6, and you'll still be in business. Here it just so happens bishop to b4 check is just an immediate knockout blow. c3 in all these lines never works. We have actually a surprise checkmate coming across there with queen takes f2. So they need to here play king e2. So that's why this was even better to throw in this move bishop to b4 check. Now our opponent's king is on e2, and they're still going to lose that rook on a1. Better for them to try to play here this move knight to d2 without allowing just such a strong bishop down that diagonal immediately. So now they've defended this rook. But we are just going to play knight takes d2. As we've seen them before, they must play king takes d2. And arguably this is their best. I think Stockfish thinks this is white's best option, even though here they're not even up a pawn and their king's on d2. It's just, it could be worse. It could be worse, like takes, c takes. So like their king's not getting mated immediately, but our king's going to castle very, very safely, and our pieces are going to come out very, very nicely. And so just a very obvious advantage for black in a position like this. So white here, not e3, not queen c1. They can play the most tempting move, which is continuing to take stuff. They take, right? Okay. Pawn takes c7. You need to also, I mean, you need to be careful here. If you take or take, you will get checkmated in one with queen d8, right? So don't let that happen. So pawn takes c7, like I was saying, just knight c6. So this is a really, really nice gambit because now we're down 3 pawns. Take, take, take. That pawn is actually still on the board. So that's what they've done their past 3 moves. But we've now played knight to c6. Really nice move. That knight joins the effort and also prevents us from getting checkmated in 1. and white here has all the same issues on f4, b2, and also the power of this bishop and some other pieces. So how's this going to go for them if they maybe try queen c1? A solid choice here, trying to defend f4 and b2. We continue with now new ideas. We now have the bishop open. We can play here bishop to c5. We can keep these threats coming. They play pawn e3. Knight takes f2. Cool little trick. King takes and queen takes f4 check with the nice pin here, and what black is completely winning. So after bishop to c5, white here doesn't really have any good options. Knight to h3. We can take that knight as well. So in this position, white here can try this move e3, which is more common than queen c1. And now we continue with queen takes b2, and we basically have the same thing, but also all the power of this bishop. So here, white can try this move, knight to d2. We can play knight takes d2 and king takes d2. But white here is like kind of surviving with king to e2. We have even better. Not that that isn't a good choice, but we have even better, which is his move, knight to c3. Hitting the queen. Queen needs to defend the rook. So c1 is their only square. And now this nice move, bishop to a3, which actually is going to win that rook in a kind of crazy twist of fate. So just like all these nice patterns that we have of, oh yeah, we have that diagonal, but oh yeah, we also have this nice resource of knight c3 and bishop to a3, and together, you'll note these pieces control all of these squares and will win the rook. And black is just winning in this endgame. White here can try to play knight b3 to try and defend their queen, but it doesn't really change anything. We can trade queens, bishop to b2, and trap the rook anyway. So with pawn takes c7, I mean, there's no great threat there. So, you know, we have all the time in the world to try and attack and try to win that rook. White's here best move was bishop to d3, I believe, according to the engine. Trying to, you know, get something for their rook, but we don't need to accept their gambit. So like, you know, in a position like this, they now have a knight and a couple pawns for the rook, and they'll be able to play knight f3 in castles. So that's what we don't want to happen. And so here we just need to come out bishop b4 check. Remember, they can never play c3 because that will be checkmate, and the knight cannot block because of these pieces that will eat it. So, you know, the king will have to move, and then we play here bishop to f5, holding that, keeping all of our threats and keeping our very, very strong initiative in a position like this. So we don't want to allow them to gambit back. So bishop to d3 is the best practical try for white, but we don't need to accept rook for a knight and losing all of our attack in a position like that. We want to keep it going. So bishop to b4 check, and king and bishop to f5 is a good way to keep everything going, and it's just not worth the material to grab that rook in any really situation. You always want to kind of try to keep that initiative. Okay, I think I have covered all the lines. I think I have covered all of the lines. Let's do a brief review. So, d4, knight to f6, bishop to g5, the Trompowsky variation, knight to e4, bishop to f4. I am going to actually touch on bishop to h4 and h4. Let's touch on that after this review. So let's talk about this. So bishop to f4, e5. Okay, what have we here? We have a very, very nice central gambit, opening our bishop, opening our queen, and forcing some awkward captures where this knight is going to dominate this dark square bishop, and white is not going to get development in this line. If white takes with the bishop, we are going to play knight to c6, which puts some pressure on the bishop already. What we want to do is we want to chase this bishop back away and try to force them to play h3 and knight takes g3. So for example, right, knight to f3, we are going to simply play d5 and now attack this bishop, h5, and try to force them to play h3, where we can take on g3 and have some nice threats. White has two options to retreat the bishop. They can play bishop to f4 or bishop to g3. Against bishop to f4, we just play d5 because they still have this way home, so we can't just throw g5 right at them yet. But once they play e3 is when we can start throwing this at them. And now the bishop is out of squares, and our favorite idea of trying to take g3. Here, we can have this even better move, h4. It's a resource that we use specifically in this position because they have this nice move, knight e2. So we play this nice move, h4, where we're just able to take it, and that's the most common move train. If they play bishop to g3 back, we just come at them with h5. And if knight d2, we can play d5, which is always a really nice way to support it. We're trying to play h4, we're trying to play g5, we're trying to play f6. White here can play knight d2 right away. Again, we just play d5, take it, and now bishop can survive pretty fine on g3. They can just play h3 and find some homes. So something we want to do if white's able to consolidate like this is queen to e7, shifting our focus to trying to take this and trying to go queen b4 check and take on b2 if they're successfully able to trade off for that knight. So that kind of covers bishop takes e5. If pawn takes e5, we want to play this move d5. We play this move d5 for a couple of reasons. Again, it supports this knight, so it's very important for that reason. It gets everybody open, and it also encourages this nice idea of pawn takes d6, queen to f6, which we'll talk about in 1 second. So they have a couple other options that are better. Knight f3 is not one of those options that's better, because bishop to c5 can force e3 due to the pressure on f2, and now cut the bishop's way home. So now they're in a situation where the bishop's threatening to be trapped, the knight is hitting g3, and our favorite time where we just get to take that and run all over them. So white can try some better options, including knight to d2. Trying to make that trade. As always in that situation, we try to play queen e7 and look at queen b4. White here has some nice ideas like queen d4 to do that, to try and take that away, but here we can come after the bishop, looking at bishop to g7 ideas. Would be the point of g5 in this situation, and here there's a nice little trick of f4. So you know, white's still in a very tricky situation here. They should play c3, we play g5, and a nice idea that we like to play is also e3, which comes up in a couple lines, which can really shut them down. So if that pawn ever gets all the way there, e3 can really shut down white's development, even if they get rid of this powerful knight. That's a reason we play d5. Either the knight's strong there, or the pawn can be very strong there. So here, white had this other move, f3. Don't forget this nice move we have here, g5, which puts white in chaos. This position is losing for them because of queen to h4 check incoming. And even if they come back with the bishop, we play knight c5. They came all the way back with the bishop, so we are just coming out with our pieces. And we're going to castle long, safely, very nicely, attacking this e5 pawn in all of these lines. White here has their last option in this position, which is pawn takes d6, which is just a bad move. It's the nice little trap. It's my favorite part of this line, probably, if I had to choose one. We got threats all over the place. If pawn takes c7, then knight to c6. Don't get checkmated on d8, or don't even allow them to trade queens on d8, for that matter. Just knight to c6, after which, you know, we've got all this good stuff incoming. We have this idea to try and trap the queen. We have multiple moments where we can play bishop to b4 check with almost nearly checkmating ideas. For example, here e3, queen takes b2. If now it takes c7, we can now play like this nice move, bishop to b4 check. There's this other moment here with queen c1 to try and take away queen takes b2. I mean, we're going to take b2 if they let us. Queen to c1 doesn't, but bishop takes d6 allows this nice resource of playing here g5 to win f2. That comes up in a couple moments here where bishop to d6 is a nice way to attack this. g5 is not as good of a way to attack this in a situation where we're trying to checkmate, because here they have bishop to g3. We can take it with the bishop, right? So if we didn't have a bishop there, then bishop to g3, white would actually probably be okay. So that covers a lot of things. I would also like to talk about, I think maybe I'll talk about bishop to h4 and h4 briefly here. Bishop to h4 is not really a great move, in my opinion. I think it's just played because it's sometimes just like the most convenient thing to do. Like, oh, we got attacked, let's just come back. What we can do here is g5. And like f3 here, you'll note, is one of the more common moves. This is always a bad trade. Even though it ruins our pawn structure, white cannot play without this dark square bishop. We can strike at their dark squares with c5, and after something like e3, just bishop to h6. Right, striking at e3, this becomes so difficult to defend so quickly. You'll know, like all of these things, like how are you defending all these things without your dark square bishop? This becomes very bad for white, I think, very quickly, in my opinion. If they play bishop to g3, that's a little bit better, but really not much, because you'll note that not a lot has moved, but this is the exact pattern we want. The knight threatening to take g3, and the pawn's coming after him. h5. We just want to play h4 and g5 f6. So now we can force them. Pawn moves. We play knight takes g3. We're very happy. Pawn takes c5. Even here, queen c7, I noted here was a nice resource to try and force king to f2 as quickly as possible. So yes, we can make that pawn move and then take g3 and then attack the soft g3 point. Common idea in this line. A common idea maybe that you can use in a few lines. h4 is like this move to try and include h4 and h6. It's just this strange move sometimes. I have this interesting gambit that I could show against this. I think for now, the simplest thing to do is even just to play right into it, which is d5, knight d2, and even just allow this takes g5 thing they wanted to open this h-file. It's not dangerous because we can just play this move e5. trying to take g5, and after pawn takes, queen takes g5, and again we've gotten rid of their dark square bishop here, and it's kind of not obvious how white develops, whereas I think black should just kind of just go knight here, bishop comes out, and castle or king, and here they have a nice looking bishop pair, does black. So I wanted to talk about a couple things. First, okay, let's talk about Deceiver Gambit and how we got there. So with the Trompowsky, and also with E, right? So something starting with E. When I look at that move Trompowsky, when I look at that word Trompowsky, which is this move bishop to G5, there is a French expression that I've noted, which is loy is probably how you would pronounce it. I am Canadian, but not a francophone. Trompe-l'oeil, which is this idea here of art that is deceiving. So something like this that they show on the Wikipedia page, where it's you'll note like this little envelope is underneath the bar, but or like on top of the newspaper, but also on top of the bar, but the newspaper has parts of it that's like underneath the envelope. So it's like it's weird how they're like, it doesn't make, there's no hierarchy of what's on top, which doesn't make sense in our physical world. So it's something that's a little bit deceiving, or something like this, which is the ceiling of this museum in Ferrara, Italy, where it looks like all the people are on these railings kind of looking down at you, which is a nice design for a ceiling. So it is optical illusions is what we'd really call this in English. It's something that deceives the eye a little bit. This is a nice painting where it really looks like that guy is walking out of the painting, something like that. So that is what it literally means. Deceive the eye. Trompe, deceive, lie, the eye. So trompe, like the Trompowsky, that's why I called it the Deceiver Gambit. And it is very, very deceiving because e5, it looks like we're really just losing a pawn. And then D and E, I like this, that D, E, like deceive, we're gambiting both those pawns. And it's deceiving because it looks like we're just going to recapture here. But actually we have this crazy move, queen f6, out of nowhere, making all of these brutal, brutal threats all over the place. So that's the Deceiver Gambit. I want to talk about this line in general and my philosophy towards openings a little bit and why we would play something like this. Oh, I realize I've had the eval bar off for a while. Sorry about that. But why we would play something like this that clearly, like, the engine hates so much. You can see that big jump in the eval bar instead of something normal like d5 or c5. When our opponent plays the Trompowsky, I touched on this a little bit at the beginning of the video. When our opponent plays the Trompowsky, they have an information advantage. They are in a situation where they probably know the theory much more than you. To win a chess game is not about playing perfectly. It's about playing better than your opponent. So either you need to play well or your opponent needs to play bad, right? You just need to be better than them. So my focus is on making them play bad, is on putting them on the back foot in psychologically very difficult situations where they need to find precise move after precise move, where if they, just continue on these natural moves, they'll find themselves in a losing or very, very difficult to play situation where I'm blitzing out moves where I know the theory and they do not. If I play here d5, Stockfish might approve, but I know my opponent is going to be in a situation where they are well prepared, where they are able to play well and play comfortably. And I'm more than willing to sacrifice a number when I know that that's going to be very, very difficult for them. I want to take my opponent out of theory. I want them as a human, the moves they'll have to play over the board are so much worse than their Stockfish preparation that this is worth it. And specifically, we can prove it because we can look at the database and all the most common moves that end in losing positions for white very, very quickly, right? So we're not just doing anything random, because like a5, so okay, white might now just play like the most obvious moves and they're doing great, right? So we're looking at something that's going to maximize their mistakes. that's going to maximize our opponent's inaccuracies and really expose them for being a human. And so when we play the Trompowsky, they think they have the information advantage, but this is something that's going to really flip that on its head. And if your opponent is able to realize the stockfish, this big number, like play all the moves and then actually attain, you know, this +1 advantage, like that's unbelievable. And they were probably going to beat you anyway. So I think this is really, really fun stuff. And you'll note, so a lot of these lines were quite tricky, and I don't expect you to remember all of them, but just kind of the big ideas. But you will know more than your opponent because your opponent knows nothing. But so when I look at a line like, let's go to one of the more complex lines. So that's like, for example, one of this one, and why I'm recommending here like h4 and takes it, and so something so like kind of crazy like this, like knight b4 and queen f6. Why do I oh, sorry, that probably was very loud for you guys. I just hit the microphone. Why do I recommend like the crazy things in preparation? It's because I'm trying to maximize my edge. I'm trying to get in a situation. So like, okay, I could prepare d5, but then I have no edge. I have no situation where my preparation is going to be better than their natural moves. Even if my opponent didn't know anything in this position, and they would probably play knight f3, e3, bishop e2 castles, and they would be fine. But I want to get into a situation where the best moves are so difficult to find. So I like complicating matters in my preparation where the moves become very, very difficult for my opponent. That's the most important thing. And that's how that's not just how I make opening preparation, where I test out these ideas. I try to make confusing things happen over the board, and I try to make things hard for my opponent. That's what I do every turn. I am not necessarily saying what's the best move, but I'm saying if I were my opponent, what move do I not want what move do I not want the other side to play, right? Because have you ever been thinking and it's like, oh, there's this move, and it's that my opponent could play, you know, like when it's their turn. So oh, there's this move that my opponent could play, and it's probably it might not even be that good, but it's like I don't want to deal with that. That's the move I'm trying to play. I am trying to put you in a very psychologically difficult situation. I am trying to play what I think you don't want to face. So that's always what I'm trying to do over the board at all times. I want to make things difficult for my opponent. That's what chess is. Chess isn't always just perfect move, perfect move, perfect move, according to the engine. Chess is pressure. Chess is facing a human and making things difficult for them. And that's what we try to do. And so, you know, that's why I'm always looking at fresh ideas. And the game is so large that I refuse to just continue to prepare just these main lines, just this set of 10 lines, as if there's nothing else that I could find. Because I'm always going to try to find something different. If this becomes popular, I'll find something else. So, and there will be something else. It's a massive game. So there's always room to innovate, and I really enjoy doing that very, very much. Anyone who says that you can only play the main lines, like only this or this is good, I would take that with certainly a grain of salt. There's so much out there, and there's so many more mistakes to be had by your opponents. All right, guys, I hope you appreciated all of that. This is turning into a very, very long video. If you've gotten this far, I would very much appreciate you guys subscribing to my channel. There's so much other opening preparation videos. They're shorter than this one. But these are all you can make a whole repertoire. Now we've covered the Trompowsky, so this is kind of like one of the last things that you can make a whole repertoire out of pretty much brand new gambits that will shock your opponents every time. So this link, the link tree, and how to play that and my games with that will be in the description. Also, the Discord, you guys can join. Awesome Discord where people share games, talk about opening ideas, etc. The weekly Gambit Genius, where things from share games can be submitted, where I will feature videos each week with this Gambit Repertoire. I'll feature games this week. Your games. You guys submit your games, and I will feature them and analyze your games in a weekly segment. And well, thank you so much. I would really appreciate a like and a subscription on YouTube. Just click the little subscribe button. And thanks so much, Gambit Chads. I will see you all next time. Take care. Peace out.